president of the Forest Resource Association. She has spoken at our annual meetings in person before, and she's going to be joined by FRA's Director of Government Affairs, Tim O'Hara, and they're going to discuss national level policies and legislation on the hardwood industry of Ohio and how it's going to be affected by the new Biden administration. So with that, I'd like to welcome Deb and Tim. Deb, it's all yours.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with everyone today, even though it's a virtual, a little different format than we've had in the past. And of course, I love working with Brad, like I know all of you do there in the Ohio Forestry Association. He's just a great advocate for the industry and a real pleasure to work with. So happy to be here, and thanks for the invitation. The theme of your annual meeting, honestly, is the question we're all asking: is what is it going to look like? Certainly, as we're hopefully coming out of the pandemic, we've all been operating in unfamiliar territory for a year. I actually, on March 13th, it'll be 365 days for FRA since we were told to leave the city and work from home as everyone was trying to work through a pandemic. So, we've never had a roadmap, any of us, on how to, work through this challenge. And thanks, Tim, I think I'm on slide 2, so we can just catch up with each other. But, as we work through this, this crisis, one of the things that has really come home for me is how resilient we are as an industry. And FRA's chairman, Lee Alexander, also senior vice president at International Paper, said a quote one time that just stuck with me, and it's that the industry is so resilient, and we've always known how to play with the cards we've been dealt, and that has really held true in this unprecedented time. And one of the things that really showed how we can rise to the occasion is when the industry was deemed an essential service to make and deliver goods to the American people, and it really helped our industry have a clear advantage for many in the sector. It also presented us with a very unique, important opportunity to make sure policymakers that are making influential decisions on how our businesses operate understand our sector and understand what makes up the wood supply chain. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later and into the policies that we're working, but I do want to pause for a moment. Well, I believe many of you are familiar with FRA. I just want to give an overview that we are the only national association that represents the wood supply chain. So our members are landowners, suppliers, and consuming mills. And we really value that relationship with all sectors. I mean, it's much like the association there at Ohio Forestry. And in addition to that, we really value the opportunity we have to work with state associations and also national associations in this space. So we value those relationships, and we value the strategic opportunities we have together and how together we can be stronger and be influential. So I did want to make a note of that, and a little more on who we are and what we do. We provide that unified voice on Capitol Hill of the wood supply chain. We also create opportunities for our members, employees, and just the company overall on how to help them be more successful, providing relevant and timely communications and activities. These primarily fall into the categories of talking about safety. I know many of you are familiar with our safety alerts, also our technical releases on identifying operational efficiencies, technical advancements, just things that can just help the industry continue to be successful and competitive. And in addition to our national presence with our headquarters, the office in Washington, D.C., we maintain a thriving region structure. We've got 6 operating regions that really do bring a unique quality as a national association, having these representatives, staff, managers that work for us across the country in the Northeast, South Central, Southeast, Appalachian area, Lake States, and also out on the West Coast. So with that overview, I'm going to circle back on our policy efforts in Washington and eventually get to this wood schematic that you're seeing there before you on the slide. I think it's probably hard to see that, but I do want you to know it's really become an effective tool, and it is available to you on our website in a format that you can certainly see and appreciate more clearly. But it all came about was during the outbreak of COVID. It really became clear to us that we had influential policymakers making decisions that impact our industry, the forest products businesses, and they didn't understand how our sector worked. So that is how this schematic came about. FRA really saw a great educational opportunity and developed a graph, a schematic, something like this that could help identify the links in the wood supply chain, talking about from the land to the suppliers to the consuming mills and how it all is connected and interrelated and dependent upon each other. So we have used it to help explain who we are as an industry, why each of these sectors are critical to an effective supply chain working. You can't just ask for toilet paper and paper towels and not understand how you're going to get that and leave the other sectors out. So it's just been a great educational opportunity. And we also see this as a very good tool to use in orienting in the orientation of new employees, briefing of customers, mill tours, state legislators that you might want to use this for to educate them, and just informing educators overall. So again, you can get that off our website. And now when I've been talking about, working with policymakers and our work in that area, we're going to talk now just about what we've done so far with the new Biden administration. And that really, we kicked that off with a position paper talking about FRA's priority policies, which Tim will dive into deeper here later in our presentation. But we also used it as a reminder to the administration and people coming on board of how important our industry is to the overall economy and well-being of the United States of America. We employ as an industry nearly 1 million workers in the United States, and we contribute almost $300 billion to the national economy. So that is no small amount. And we also have taken the time to emphasize the importance of our industry in rural America. And where our member facilities are, like many of you in Ohio, they're making that economic base in those communities thrive, and how important that is to our country. We've got a very similar approach with members of Congress, and we'll be spending most time focusing on those committees that will have jurisdiction over our issues. Transportation, labor, and securing the definition of forest-based biomass are where we really feel like we've got some critical opportunities before us. And talking about the 117th congressional landscape, we realize that, and you all do as well, is that we have a very challenging opportunity and environment. I guess there's challenges and opportunities in everything, but Speaker Nancy Pelosi is going to have a harder time maneuvering this House due to the Republican success and protecting incumbents and adding 12 additional seats. And, we also, just a reminder, we still have seats in play. Unfortunately, we have 2 Republican members now, deceased in Texas and Louisiana, and special elections will be held there on April 24th. We've got a Democratic seat that remains vacant due to Mr. Richmond's moving over to the White House as public engagement director, and he was a congressional leader in Louisiana. So that election will take place on April 24th. There's 2 closely contested seats that are still taking place in Iowa and New York. Currently, Republicans are were elected in both those locations, but they're also being strongly contested. So that's very much in play. So all of this is taking place in an environment that is very tense right now in Washington. You all have been watching. I know we were all horrified to watch the riots take place in the Capitol Hill or in the Capitol, and it's still a tragedy that's unfolding. But in addition to just dealing with that tragedy, we've just got another significant landscape change in Washington. We've got this formidable, intense fence that's still surrounding our Capitol, which is heartbreaking to see. And it sounds like it still could be up for months. And military grounds are still surrounding the building. I know I've talked to colleagues that offices were closer to the Capitol that are used to being able to just walk around the Capitol and just be a part of that beautiful scene. For any of those of you that have visited Washington, it's just so beautiful, and it's so changed right now. So for those of us that live here and those of you that love the Capitol across the country, it's just a really hard time. And in addition to that, we also know that we've got we can't meet with members of Congress. It's still a virtual format, so we're still dealing with that. So as we work with the House That is a dynamic that we're going to play. So the slide up now just kind of gives you the landscape of the political environment. And now, moving into the Biden administration, we've got cabinet nominees that are ongoing, key people in place for the agencies that are going to impact the industry. One of those being Secretary Tom Vilsack, who won his nomination, serving again as Agricultural Secretary. And of course, he's interested in working with us. He wants to find solutions with the forest products industry and is certainly mindful of how things can impact the success of our industry. I'm very happy to say he's committed to two things that are very important to us, and that was one, processing the logger relief funding that was included in the provisions in the December legislation in response to a question from Senator Bozeman that FRA requested that he make. We also know that he has expressed support for new markets for wood products and potential biomass opportunities in terms of energy production as the USDA looks to at the renewable biofuels conversation that's taking place now in our country. And EPA, again, another very important administrator for us, Michael Regan, and Secretary of Labor nominee Marty Walsh. Those are two key offices that we're going to be working with. Michael Regan said he's committed to working with USDA on forestry issues, quoting him, saying we're going to work together with farmers and foresters to make sure that they have tools and information that they need to continue to be stewards of the land as we tackle climate and other agricultural and environmental issues. So, we've got a lot in play. The priorities that we want to identify that for the Biden administration, of course, has been this COVID-19 pandemic package. We're all watching, see if it gets through the Senate. Stimulus, again, another one that's moving now. Climate change, conversations are going on right now. Immigration policies, big, and racial equity also. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim, and he's going to provide more detail on the issues that are important to FRA.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm going to hop off here because we got a couple videos to not hop off the discussion, Deb, but hop off the video. I bat about 500 when I'm doing presentations and video, but I will just say hello to everybody. The background there, I thought I'd bring you a little winter scene from Ontario, Canada, fishing trip I was on a number of years ago. So I'm going to close my video down and I'll pop back on after we get through the slides here. So Deb mentioned climate change. That's a big issue for the Biden administration. As you all know, it's in the news every day, along with the COVID relief package that is now in the Senate waiting to be voted on. So a couple things the Biden administration did early on is they had a couple executive orders on climate change. The first one was to have an interagency panel put together to put a cost on carbon, and that can be used in a number of ways. One of the primary ways is to use that in the cost benefit analysis and get support for regulatory actions of the administration or support legislation in Congress. So they are working on that. They were supposed to have a report out, I believe, I think it was into this month or earlier in the month, on how they're going to do that, and the price of carbon will be finalized in January 2022. So if you look back in history, the Obama administration put a carbon price of $52 on the cost of carbon. The EPA, depending on the model and interest rate they use, had a cost between $11 and $62 per ton. And most recently, the National Academy on Science, Engineering, and Medicine estimated the cost of carbon of $125 per ton. And if you look north of our borders in Canada, Trudeau has recently announced a $170, or he's talking about $170 per metric ton Canadian dollar price on carbon. Then if you look at the Paris Agreement, concluded that, $40 per ton for carbon is crucial to get renewable energy moving forward and to meet the intent of the Paris Agreement. So right now you can see the price of carbon is all over the board. And that's important in the climate change space because as we know, the forest products industry creates a lot of biomass, especially the consuming mills. And they use that biomass to generate energy, and they're quite efficient at doing so. Most paper mills generate 80+% of their own energy needs. So if we are not recognized as biomass as a renewable for the bioenergy sector, then in a climate tax scheme, these charges and the price of carbon could really increase the cost of the manufacturing sector. So if you look at the second executive order, address a number of things, but the things that looked at the forestry sector were a couple. One was the 30 by 30 initiative. This initiative will or has the goal of conserving, some folks say preserving, 30% of the lands and waters in the U.S. This is, if you look at those lands, it's probably about the size of Texas, the acreage amount, if you were to look at conserving 30% of those lands. So most recently, I think just yesterday, the House passed File 803, which designated 2 million acres of federal land into a preservation state, and that legislation is in the House currently and has went to the or in the Senate and has went to the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. So that one will be watching closely to see how the 30 by 30 plays out. And if you look at those 2 million acres, that remove the opportunities for timber harvest, mineral leasing, oil leasing from those properties. The other mention in the executive order was tree planting. And this kind of the artifact the Biden administration carried forward from Trump and Bruce Westerman's legislation, the Trillion Trees Act, and recognizing that forests and trees and planting trees is important. And every survey I've seen on tree planting, it resonates very well with the public. So you can see why the reforestation initiative in the climate discussions is very popular and supported by both Republicans and Democrats. So the other thing is the encouraging adoption of climate smart forestry practices. I'm not sure what those are at this point, and I don't think they've been developed to a large degree, but it's critical that we have a say in these forestry practices and how, as an industry, it's all inclusive in the climate space to include not only the landowners in those discussions, but the logging communities and all the way through the supply chain to those manufacturing facilities and support of new markets. So that's one we're going to keep a close eye on. And finally, under that climate change space, Robert Bonney, who is the Deputy Chief of Staff for the USDA, also served in the Obama administration. They've been talking about commodity credits and carbon being treated as a commodity like corn, soybeans, and wheat. And what that does, it opens up the credit line for the credit corporation, commodity credit corporation, which then allows folks who grow carbon, quote unquote, to receive production subsidies for doing so and incentives to participate. And I'm assuming those incentives are the climate smart forestry practices. So again, we'll keep an eye on that. And all this will be, the USDA is also talking about those credits being put into a carbon bank where these credits would then be sold back into the marketplace for folks who put carbon back into the atmosphere, or CO2. So you can see how the carbon pricing, the carbon credits, and the carbon bank all could impact the forest products industry. And if bioenergy from forest-based biomass is not recognized, it could be in a very negative way. So on the bioenergy front, the forest products industry has been united for many years in moving appropriations language and getting that legislation that when the federal agencies recognize energy projects, they must recognize forest-based biomass as carbon neutral. So that's language we will continue to support and move forward this Congress. And the other opportunity we had was in the Trump administration was having the EPA finally move forward with rulemaking and have some more permanency in recognizing forest-based biomass as carbon neutral. This was stalled due to some internal complications with the Department of Justice and the Affordable Clean Energy Rule under Trump, and a lawsuit that was pending and was ongoing at that time. So the EPA did not publish that rule, and obviously the Trump administration was not put back in office. So this is a great deal of uncertainty here. But if you look back, I believe 10 years ago, the people who supported directing EPA to recognize biomass was a very large bipartisan group. And I think what we need to do as an industry is reach out to that group again. A lot of them are still in office, and bring that group together and see where they're on this recognition of forest-based biomass, and put some hill pressure on the EPA to make it a priority to recognize or dust off the rule the Trump administration started, and at least give a good look at it and recognize forest-based biomass as carbon neutral. And if this isn't done, it kind of conflicts with the efforts to improve the forest, especially on federal lands, because if you don't have a biomass carbon neutrality rule, you really can't seriously address the Forest Service in their lands and the BLM and the mortality if you don't have markets for that stuff. It would just be too costly to remove the biomass, improve forest health if you don't have markets for those products. So we'll be looking at very closely as we move on. So one of the things FRA did is we developed carbon fact sheets, and these carbon fact sheets are available at the state level and national level, and they will help you address the climate change initiatives at the state level, which we think a lot of these will be going to being addressed in the states. I know the lake states are looking at climate change initiatives, as I'm sure many other states are as well. So these carbon fact sheets will just help you prepare and show the importance of forests in the role of climate change. So switching gears, no pun intended, we're looking at the Safe Routes Act as well. So this legislation was introduced last year, and it just is very simple, very straightforward. But this would allow log trucks hauling raw forest products, which was defined as biomass, chips, pulpwood, and logs, to the interstate where that interstate access is available. That's roughly, we think 25 to 40% of the log trucks out there have access to an interstate route when they deliver their raw forest products. So it's limited transportation, 150 miles, but I think I'll get into the next slide, which is, FRA has been supporting quite a bit of research on this, and we looked at 4 states in the Southeast. We have an ongoing project in Minnesota, and this video here is Dr. Joe Conrad, which from University of Georgia, who did the research for us last year, and it kind of explains the key points of the Safe Routes Act.
I want to share the results of the measure the safety benefits of allowing state legal tender transportation on interstate highways. Right now, every state in the U.S. allows heavier trucks to operate on state roads consideration and limited to specific commodities such as wood, dairy products, and so forth. The result of this disparity in weight limits between state roads and interstate highways is that timber transportation vehicles have to actively avoid interstate highways and instead travel through small towns and rural communities. In order to understand where crashes are most likely to occur, 40% of all crashes in the U.S. occur at intersections, including 27% of fatal truck crashes. Fatal truck crashes are anywhere from 3 to 4 times as likely on state roads as on interstate highways. In Georgia, fewer than 5% of timber transportation crashes occur on interstate highways, but 41% of them occur within 5 miles of an interstate highway. The reason for this is that state weight limits are not allowed on interstate highways, forcing timber transportation to occur in small towns, rural communities, where there's more likely to be involved in an accident. Purpose of this study was to estimate-
Hey, Tim, I think we ought to stop the video. It's not coming through well.
Oh, okay. I will
Yeah.
stop the video.
Yeah, you know, what we can do is, it's a good video, and I think it kind of tells a good story for our industry. And we'll make it available to you, Brad, to share with people so they can watch it. So I think I'd just go to the next slide, Tim.
Yes.
Thanks, Deb. Deb, we'll share it later. Thank you.
Sure. And I think that holds true. We have another video we wanted to share that we worked with on Rayonier, and we'll not show that. I think we'll probably have the same outcome as this one, and we'll send it over to you, Brad.
Yeah, we're pushing up on our time limit too. So in
Sure.
real simple terms, if you look at the current slide that's up there, the secondary roads are on the top. The bottom is an interstate access. So the top road has all those variables up there, which really increase the odds of an accident. And we have data through the research that supports that. If you recall, back in Maine and Vermont, they did a pilot project back in 2010, which is now a permanent, where they allowed trucks at heavier weights access to the interstate. And since that time, damage to secondary roads has decreased, and fatal accidents have declined both on state roads and they have a slight downward trend on interstate. So the accident rate is really important, and it was reduced on those secondary roads. So just looking at who already has exemptions, there's 12 states that already have interstate exemptions for the entire interstate system. The other states on the right-hand side have existing forestry exemptions, which allow those trucks to travel heavier weights legally on state roads. You can see Ohio weight limit is 86,000 pounds, the forestry exemption on secondary roads. And this has been done a couple other times before. The surface transportation bill, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Texas had provisions in there that allowed certain segments of the interstate to haul product. Minnesota and Wisconsin was specific to forestry products. And quickly, we're going to reintroduce the bill next week. Congressman Gallagher is committed to dropping the bill in the House. The bill last Congress had bipartisan support, and we're going to move the bill in that same manner in the 117th Congress, is building bipartisan support and using the research that we have to support that. And we're also going to work with the railroad and safety groups. We've been having meetings with these groups. The irony here is the Class 1 railroads, which is the larger railroads, have agreed to remain neutral on this issue and not support nor oppose. But we are running into some concerns with the short line railroads. So we are meeting with these groups, and hopefully we can convince them. And Chairman DeFazio had a commitment last Congress to work with Congressman Gallagher on this issue. And when we introduce that bill, we're going to re-engage DeFazio's staff and hopefully work with them to get a legislation. It may look differently, but hopefully get legislation that addresses this issue. And lastly, and we had, labor is very important to the forest products industry. And one of the areas is tree planting. We're doing the forest. If you look at H-2B workers, where we currently get 85% of the workforce to plant trees. And, until this year, we did not have a lot of information on this. So FRA put out a survey, and we used that information from the employers of H-2B workers to work with the Trump administration, the USDA, members of Congress, and Forestry was very grateful for what we get. We're recognized the national interest in tree planting was very important. So we had a pathway to get our H-2B workers, even though President Trump issued a proclamation suspending the entry of non-immigrant labor into the U.S. So the H-2B for workforce, specifically for forestry workers, was provided an exception to that proclamation. And we just finished up another survey. So we surveyed after this and asked people how well it went this year. And we estimate that, 75% of the tree planting work got completed. And folks were looking at, prior to the proclamation exemption and not having any tree planting at all. So we are very grateful. We got 75% of the labor we needed to plant trees, and we will continue to work on expanding access to forestry workers and non-immigrant labor. So with that, I will skip the video. This can be found on our website. It's a very good video that we put together with Rainier and really describes the importance of H-2B workers.
All right. Well,
there's Joe Conrad again.
Really appreciate Deb and Tim coming with us here today. We did have one question that came into the chat section. I'll read off here. So Charles McClure asks, will construction of mass timber and cross-laminated buildings get credit for carbon sequestration? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we have every reason to believe that's the case. There's still a lot in play right now, but we're certainly hearing indications from key leaders that is definitely something that we should be able to count on, especially with
yeah,
yeah. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I think in that aspect, the markets in recognition of biomass, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change addressed that issue. So I do think, especially the solid wood product sides and the new timber products, and Westerman, even in his legislation, had chemicals and plastics from wood being recognized. So yeah, those discussions will be had, and I think solid wood products is pretty much a slam dunk on storing carbon.
All right.
That's great.
That's all the questions we had, which either means that I forgot to tell people to ask questions, or you guys did such a great job with filling us with information they didn't need to. So, hey, Deb,
thank you, Brad.
I really appreciate you guys joining us today, and there's a great update there. I'm sure we'll see you guys shortly somewhere else.
Look forward to it.
Probably on Zoom until this summer, but
yeah, thanks for having us, Brad. I appreciate it. And of course, we're always available if we can help out, and we'll get those videos over to you to share.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay,
Thanks,
take
Deb.
care.
Thanks,
Bye.
Tim.